Evolution and Culture Seminar series. We have a really exciting lineup of speakers, and they are all online. If you just look at def.ucla.edu, the complete list for the quarter is up there. And we hope to see you back next week and the week after that. Next week, we have Errol Ake coming from the University of Tennessee Institute for Mathematical and Biological Synthesis. And he is going to be talking about the evolution of motivations and behavioral responses. So be sure to check out the abstract for that. And this week, I am pleased to introduce Rady Gneezy from the University of California, San Diego. He is the Endowed Chair at the Rady School of Management and the Professor of Management and Strategy. And he's going to be talking today about gender differences in preferences.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So it's the first time that I'm talking to such an audience. Economists usually don't clap, and if they do, it's only at the end. So that's one difference. Now, there are going to be many differences that will come out, I'm sure, during my presentation. One of them is that I'll appreciate any questions during the seminar, during the talk, and not waiting till the end. And I'll appreciate if you won't laugh when I trip over the gender differences in preferences. I'm going to talk about two related lines of research that goes with this. One of them will be a bit towards the nurture side of it, the other one a bit towards the nature. The first one I know a bit more about. The second one will be something that hopefully Moshe can help me over here. He's a graduate student. Well, he was a graduate student at Chicago. Now he's a postdoc at San Diego. And he was the leader on this project, so he will help me later on. But let's start with the problem. So there is a gender gap in many things that we look at. So if we look at wages, we look at positions in academia, in the business world, we see that men are much more likely to be at the top positions. CEOs, I don't remember the numbers, but Fortune 500 CEOs are something like 100 to 1 men. You look at universities, you see that the undergrads, the fraction of women is larger than men. PhD still, but a bit less. Untenured faculty, it's almost balanced. Tenured faculty dominated by males. Maybe in anthropology it's different. In biology I don't know, but in general that's what you see. Economists talk about three main reasons why this could happen. One of them could be the balance. So women are smarter than men. They don't want to work 70 hours a day in Wall Street a week, but at the end of the day, that means that you're going to be less successful. The chance of ending up as a CEO is smaller if you don't stay 70 hours a week and work. So that's a simple preference. That's not the kind of preferences that I'm going to talk about. Those are kind of trivial preferences in a sense that I'm not going to discuss. I'm going to discuss other trivial preferences. Ability is another explanation, and Larry Summers lost his job as a president of Harvard by making comments about the differences in ability. Basically, his argument was, say that the distribution of men and women, say that the mean is the same, the ability of men and women is the same, but the distribution has higher variance for men. Right? So in the lower end, you see more dumb men, and I think everyone agrees on that. But if you think about the next person that will get the Nobel Prize in physics, for example, then you're looking at the person that is really up there in the distribution, right? And you're more likely to find a man over there. It's a stupid argument on many levels. One, because it's politically incorrect and he lost his job. Second, it's not based by any scientific data, right? So you can come up with arguments, the same arguments you can come up about many other aspects of life, but it's kind of basing discrimination on unbased argument is kind of a problem. To his defense, he did not support it. He didn't say, oh, that's what I think is happening. He just said, let's raise an argument, right? Let's come up with the hypothesis. And, well, that's the ability story. Maybe there are differences in ability. Maybe the average man is more likely to be a good CEO than the average woman. Another explanation could be discrimination, right? So we all know that discrimination exists in the world. And my favorite story here is that when we came back to Israel in '97, after I finished my PhD, my wife finished her MBA. And she looked for a job. She went for an interview with the guy. She got all the way up to the CEO of the company. She was the only one that got that far, and she had a great conversation with him for more than an hour. And then she told him, oh, by the way, I have 2 little girls at home. And she says that literally his pen fell when he heard it. He said, but I told you that you'll have to go abroad from time to time. She told him, yeah, that's fine. My husband doesn't have a real job. He's a professor, so he can take care of the kids. That's fine. It didn't happen. So, discrimination is definitely out there, right? We definitely see discrimination. We want to raise an additional explanation. It's not an alternative. It's an additional one in which we basically look at competitive preferences. And the argument is going to be that men are more competitive than women. Again, that could be, I'll try to be clearer in the definition of it each time that I look at it. Men are more competitive than women, and more competitive people are more successful in, if you want to be the CEO of a big company, you have to be more competitive. Right, so that would be the argument that I'll try to push and try to convince you that is correct. We are not the first to come up with it. We are maybe the first in economics to come up with it, but just two examples of experiments that supported this. The first one with Muriel Needle and Aldo Rostechini. We asked students, it was the Technion, the Israeli Institute of Technology, so students are not the typical or stereotypical students that you will find the gender roles that you might think. All of them studied to be engineers. We put 6 of them in a room in front of computers to solve mazes. In one case, so in each time it was balanced, 3 men and 3 women. In one case, they had 15 minutes to solve as many mazes as they can, and they were paid according to a piece rate, say $1 per maze they solved. And in the other case, there was a competition between them, so a winner take all. The person that solved the most mazes won the $6 per maze that he or she solved. What we found is that there wasn't a big difference. There was a small difference, not statistically significant, when it was piece rate. When we switched to the competitive incentives, men succeeded much more than women. So men's ability improved a lot in the competitive treatment. Women's did not. Women's success was not changed. So that's one example that when you make the incentives more competitive, women are less likely to put effort maybe than men, and that's started the discussion that we had. In another paper with Aldo Rostechini, we looked at kids running. So it was during a PE class. In one case, the 2 kids they start by running alone, and then the teacher matches them according to ability. So the teacher goes with the algorithm, and the 2 fastest run next to each other the next time, and then so on. And what we saw is that when kids run next to each other, boys improve a lot relative to the first time, girls don't. Again, that's another piece of evidence that there is some kind of gender difference in competitiveness. And there are many other papers after that I can cite. I don't want to get into this.
In the race example, were the kids paired by gender at all, or was it mixed?
So it was the algorithm was according to ability, according to how fast you ran in. So we have single sex and mixed sex.
And did it matter whether they were mixed?
That's actually a great question. I didn't want to get into it too much, but in the first one, we also had groups of only women competing, or only men competing. On the men, it didn't matter. They made lots of effort, whether they were only men or men and women. Women's behavior improved a lot, so they put more effort when it's a single-sex group. Okay? So it seems as if there is something with competing against men. In the running example, we did not find this effect. And one reason could be that the entire class is watching them. So it might be important who watches them. Since then, there is, I think that in the paper that I sent you, we talk about it a bit. There are mixed results about this. In some cases, the gender composition is important. In others, it's not. So single-sex schools, for example, girls are much more competitive than in mixed-sex schools. But you don't know if it's selection or not, right? So the jury, I think, is still out about how important it is. But it seems to matter in different environments differently. Okay? So nature versus nurture, right? That's what we're doing here. Why do we observe these differences? And you can think about 2 extreme strongmen that are clearly wrong. I don't think that, we'll wait until Moshe will finish his call. I hope that no one over here thinks that it's only nature or only nurture. I definitely don't want to put the impression that I think that it's one of them, right? So it's, but at least showing evidence in each direction could be useful. So what can we do? In the first one, the nature one, that's actually a funny slide. So in general, talking about evolution to economists is a funny experience. Why is it funny? There wasn't a single time that I sent a gender paper and they didn't get a comment. So we mentioned, we always have not more than a footnote, because more than a footnote, the paper is rejected. But a footnote, saying, look, these people. And we always get a referee who tells us that, oh, evolution is bullshit. You can prove this and the opposite using it and take it out. And, when I talk with economists, I ask them, who believes in economics or in evolution? Everyone raises their hands, right? And if anywhere the evolutionary explanation makes sense, I think it's here, right? That's one of the strongest cases. Still, my feeling about the view of economists about this is that there's so much bad work in evolutionary economics. There is some good work, but apparently it's also easy to do bad work in evolutionary economics. And that's the taste that many economists are left with. So it's very hard just to make it more than a footnote. Again, in the paper that I distributed to you, there was a page discussing this, and the referees made us take it out of the paper. So it's, anyway, I think that, as I said, if anywhere evolution makes sense, it's here with, gender differences in competitiveness. I'm not going to embarrass myself and talk with you about why, because, again, better than I do. Again, the straw man that I'm going to look at from both directions. In order to find the first evidence about nurture, our strategy was to go to two different societies, very distinct societies, in which we might expect to see some kind of differences. So the two societies that I'm going to talk about, one of them is a patriarchal, very extreme patriarchal society, and one of them is a matrilineal society. The first one is in Africa. That's going to be the Masai tribe in Africa. Anyone knows what's interesting about this picture? That's the team that was there. That's it. I didn't say that it's a joint paper with John List and Ken Leonard. That's Ken. That's me. Anyone can see what's interesting about this picture? Yes, Kilimanjaro. That's the most I've seen of it. Masai tribe in Tanzania. It's a tribe of warriors, completely male dominated. They marry only when they're 30, with very young girls. Women are basically treated like property over there. So when you ask a man how many kids he has, he would tell you how many boys he has, right? So he will not count the girls. So a woman costs about 10 cows. So that's the kind of exchange that is used over there. It's not a place where you want to be a woman, right? They are not treated well. Men basically wake up in the morning, walk after the cattle. The women work like crazy all day long, right? So it's the Masai tribe is not going to be that important, because it turns out that it's the same if you look at the Masai tribe or the UCLA tribe. People behave very similarly, so I'm not going to talk too much about them. The more interesting one would be the other one, the matrilineal society. But we wanted to look at the most extreme patriarchal society we could find. The second group is the Bekasi in northeast India. That's a more interesting tribe, because when we started this, we wanted to look for a matriarchal society. We spoke with anthropologists. They said there isn't anything like that. Matrilineal is the best you can do. Matrilineal, and then we understood that it's not a one or two dimensional. It's a multi-dimensional scale that we didn't want to get too deep into this. We asked them, where should we go? They said the two textbook places are one are the Bekasi, the other one there is a group in China that we can look at. We chose the Bekasi, and I'll try to tell you a bit about them. Matrilineal society, so everything goes from the mother to the youngest daughter. Everything is organized around the mother's or the grandmother's house. So she's in charge of money. She's in charge of decisions, what to do in the household. She's the one who gets all the money and distribute it. Men are not allowed to own real estate. All the things that are written over here. They're raised to think about making decisions, right? The youngest daughters gets it at the end. Women never join the husband, right? The husband family. What's interesting about it is that, at least to me, was that the gender roles are kept. So women will do the laundry and whatever, look at themselves, and men will work in the rice field, right? So men will still lift the heavy stuff, right? It's not like this is reversed. That's an interesting sign that basically says we men, we want some rights too, right? Which, you know, that's in Shillong, the big city. So it's a tribe, about 3 million people, Northeast India. They have their own languages over there, and they raise rice, basically. That's what they do. That would be our comparison. Those are just two sides to try and convince you that they are indeed different, the two societies. Any questions about the setup that we had? Nothing. Good. Design. So it's a very simple experimental design that we had. Similar environment, 2 different villages in each society. We recruited by going, I didn't say it, and that's something important even about the matrilineal society, that there's still a headman. So while the women are making the decision within the household, the village politics is done by men, right? So the headmen in the village and so on, those are people that make all the decisions over there. So we approached them in order to get this. So we wanted to not to have some selection problem. We asked everyone to show up. When they arrived, we directed them in one of 2 lines. I think that I have a picture soon. So this is the picture. So think about the school. So think about the village. It's a more in India. It's a bit more advanced than the African places we've been to. So we go to the school or the clinic. We ask one group of people to wait over here. And then we're going to run the experiment with them on the other side. Same is true for the second group. They don't see each other. They know that this group exists, and the other one knows that this group exists, but they don't see each other. And that's when we run the experiment with each one of them. I'll explain in a second what's in the experiment. Instructions were translated from English to the local language and back, just to see that it's fine. We read it aloud to each individual subject in the place. We had 1 male and 1 female experimentalist, which turned out to be important. The task that they had was to throw a tennis ball to 3 meters away from them. Each one had 10 trials to try and succeed. And a successful shot meant that the tennis ball entered and stayed there. We chose it because it's simple. Actually, that's a funny story. So when we went there, we wanted to use mazes. We printed lots of mazes. We went there with the mazes, and we wanted to use them. We go to that was in Tanzania. We started in Tanzania. We go to the hospital to try and do some pre-tests. The first man does it. It takes long, but he does it. The first woman, she's not even willing to hold the pen in her hand because, she never held a pen. She's not going to start now. So we had to find something else. I spent the day in Arusha in a workshop, trying to build mazes from wood. After a day, I had 1 maze and it had a mistake in it. So that's how we came up with the balls, right? Again, you can plan a lot, but when you go to run this over there, it's a bit of a problem. That was the task, throwing the ball 10 times. And that's how it looks. So you have the tennis ball, you can throw it to the bucket. That picture is supposed to be funny for some reason, but we'll skip this, right? Payments, that's the only decision that they make. how to be paid, and they made it before performing the task, and those were the two options that they had. So they could either be paid, say, $1 per success, each ball that goes in. So if you made 4 balls, you'll get $4. Or you can choose to be paid $3 per every success, but only if you'll do better than the other person that is on the other side of the house. Remember the house that we had before? If you'll do better than the person you're matched with, then you'll be paid 3 times the number. So if you did 4 and the other one did 2, you'll get $12. But if you did 4 and the other guy did 6, you'll get 0. Okay, and so basically they had to choose whether they want to be paid according to piece rate or according to tournament. That was the only choice that they had to make in the experiment. And we paid them similar amounts. Questions about the design? Yes?
Was it a tournament or was it just against one other player? So they were just competing?
Just against one other player. The player that we told them that is on the other side, they didn't know the gender of the other player. They of course didn't know who the other player is, and they didn't know the gender.
So they were blind to the gender?
Yes, yes. We did it because we didn't have enough power to look at what happens if you know that it's a man or a woman.
You said there were no differences in ability. Did that turn out in the
Yes,
actual competition?
yes. So for some reason, men are much better at this task, especially the Masai. They have spears, so they're really good. No gender differences in this. Actually, women were slightly better, not statistically significant. So no gender difference in this. So we got lucky with this task.
And what was the success rate?
I'll have it over here, I think around 3. I have it in one of the slides that come on the slide.
What can one buy with 20 rupees?
So 20 rupees at the time, a day labor would earn something like 60 rupees in this village. So you can make a day's wage over there with this, which is not too bad, I think. Okay. So here's the success rate maybe we'll get here. Yes. So that's just general information, not cut into gender. You see that the success rate was 238 or 275, depending where you were. Those are the ends. That's less interesting, maybe, this slide.
What was in the parentheses?
The standard error, I guess. So that's the data. That's the interesting figure from here. So we say that with the Masai, we find what we find when we run it in Chicago or when we run it in San Diego or in Tel Aviv, right? We see that men are much more likely to choose to compete than women.
So in some of your other papers, you tested performance, that performance actually increases when they're in a
Right.
situation. Did you test that here?
We couldn't over here because it's endogenous, right? I make the decision whether to compete, and then I do it. So we did find that people who chose to compete were better, but we don't know if it's because they were under competition or maybe the better people selected into competitiveness. We cannot disentangle it with this. To do this, what you need is within subject, you have to look at the same person a few times maybe, or we didn't do that. Okay, so that's what we find everywhere that we looked for so far. We see big gender difference in the propensity to choose to compete. Right? Many more men choose to compete than women. Anyone wants to guess what we found in the matrilineal society?
Same thing, but slightly reduced.
Same thing, but slightly reduced, flipped, or the same, right? So those are the 3 options. We were very happy to see that it actually flipped.
I read it.
Okay, that's a good way to know, right? It was actually flipped. We were very happy to see this because that's also the politically correct one. Because if we would say, look, we went to the other culture and turns out that culture is not that important, that would have been more difficult maybe to sell. This one is easier to sell. So we could see that I'm an economist. I don't have any ideology. So it's we found that in the matrilineal society, women were more competitive actually than men. Right? So the gender propensity to participate in competition disappears. Right? Yes?
So, are there differences in earnings between men and women?
Learning?
Earnings.
Earnings, yes. So in any case, choosing to compete is always almost always better in this case because it pays 3 times more, right? So the more you choose to compete, the more you earn in expectation, right? So I would say that, yes. And I don't remember, I don't think that I have the figure, but there is a difference. Yes?
Seems that you're using competitiveness in two different senses. Right, so one is improvement in performance
Right.
in a competitive circumstance.
That was the first wave of papers
This
that I talked
is
about.
the choice
Selection,
to compete.
yes.
And it seems that they're different, potentially different
Absolutely,
characteristics.
absolutely. And many people, we called it competitiveness, but many people object to this, and I fully understand what they're talking about, right? So I think that it does measure some kind of competitiveness, but I'm sure that you can think about 3 other ways in which people can be competitive, right? And that this doesn't capture. That's the best we could do. If you have a suggestion of doing
Well,
something.
I just raised the empirical question whether people whose performance improves more under competition also prefer to compete.
Right, so if it's
Yes,
the
that's
same
true.
people, right, if it's the same people. So we know that it's the same gender, right? If we'll run it at Castle, we'll probably find that men are going to be more likely to increase their effort and are also more likely to choose to compete. But if it's right, I agree with this, yes.
Who's responsible for kind of providing for the family, like financially?
That's a very important question, and that's why I didn't want to. I said that the Masai is not that interesting, because with the Masai you can come up with an alternative explanation. For women over there, the money that they get is the husband giving them, I don't know, $5, go to the market and buy some food. That's the only. So every cent that they get is accounted for. Getting money in the experiment could be the first money of their own that they have in their lives. So they might be much more risk averse and choose not to compete, simply because the money, if they can get a few dollars, that's a lot of money for them, right? So with the Masai, it's a bit of a problem. With the Bekasi, it's not so much of a problem, because it's true that the women are controlling the money in the household, but men are not nearly as deprived as in the Masai. So men have money. So if you'll ask a man, does he have money in his pocket? He will have money in his pocket, as well as the woman. And they go out, they work, and they get a large share of the money, right? So
Men earn
yes. So much of they are farmers, right? So much of it's labor work. The men are not, they get their fair share. So it's with the Masai, it's a problem. With the Bekasi, which is what we care about, because this is easy to replicate at UCLA, as I said. This one is more difficult, and over here it's less of a problem. Okay, so this leads us to the first, conclusion that, let's look at some other numbers over here. I think it's the same. It could be nice to say nurture is the only thing that is important, but that would be not even funny. I think nature is also important. Nurture, is also important, right? I think that we show that we can reverse the effect by looking at different culture, and the interpretation that we gave this is that this could also be important, right? It's not just nature. It's not just that we are born different. Any questions before I move to the second part? Yes?
Do you have any idea of people's expectations about gender differences in ability in the task? So I think here maybe some people were surprised that there wasn't.
Right. So that was a big concern, I think, with our first paper on mazes. Women are slightly worse than men in solving mazes.
And
The stereotype could be even stronger, but it's enough. So if you think about a model in which women are a bit less good at this, and effort is costly, you can come up with a solution in which, when it becomes competitive, women shouldn't put effort, because an expectation they will earn less, right? It's true about the mazes. It's true about tennis balls. So by now, I think that there are at least 25 tasks in which this was done, and it seems to be persistent. I have a paper with Aldo Restukini in which we look at anagrams. Solving anagrams, we see much smaller difference than when we see when they're shooting baskets, right? So there is some effect to the task stereotype, but still, even if you look at anagrams, which is the best we could find in terms of stereotype being that women are better, and they were not better actually, but the stereotype is that in what we did, the stereotype is that women are better. We didn't find the reverse. We found the same kind of effect. Okay? So that's the nurture part. The nature part, and before that, when does it start? Still with the nurture part. At what age does it start? That could be interesting. Yes? No, okay, just stretching. If we can know at what age it starts, that could be potentially interesting for public policies, for example. So still, this time it's only the Bekasis. So we are talking only about the Bekasi hills, in which there are matrilineal villages and patriarchal villages next to each other. So just in the same, a mile from each other, there could be two different villages. So we are comparing over there. It's with Stefan Anderson, Sida Ertak, and John List, and Sandra Maxima, well, whatever. Kids competition. Okay, so we found, as I told you about running next to each other, we found the difference. We found that boys reacted more. We look at kids 7 to 15-year-old. By the way, with this, with the running task, there are two interesting papers now that try to replicate this. So the two kids that run next to each other. In Sweden, there is no effect. Anna Draber has a nice paper in which she looks at it, tries to replicate it, no success. Kids in Sweden, alone and together, no gender difference whatsoever. Matthias Suter tried to do it in Austria, and in Austria he did find a strong gender difference. Right? So it seems to be somehow related to culture also, even with the kids that we have. But, those were 10-year-old kids and we found difference. Now we're going to look at 7 to 15-year-old kids. We have groups of them, and we'll try to see if there are changes during this period. Yes?
Do you have any idea of what it would have in those two cultures?
So if you look at some kind of indices of gender equality, for example, Sweden is number 1. Austria is somewhere, I don't remember, number 27, something like that. So that's our guess. And the next step, we're trying to get some money to do it, across different places in Europe, for example, and compare it to the index and see if it correlates with it. And that's our guess at this point. But clearly Austria, is in this index is way, way lower. And Israel is around the same place as Austria. Sweden is number 1 in gender equality.
And is your idea that equity makes folks more comfortable with competition, or will make women more comfortable with competition, or feel motivated? But what's the link between equity and?
This I can speculate. I don't know.
Yes.
Right? Speculation, I would say that it's more comfortable with competing. That, it's fine, you can compete. That would be my guess. In the Masai, I'm sure that a girl that will try to compete will be shut down by her mother or her father, right? It will not be allowed. And maybe in other societies it's also like this. Sweden, it's not like this, apparently. That would be my guess, but speculation.
Do we know whether females are increasing their competition or men are reducing theirs?
I don't think that we can. So one of the reasons that we want to have finance and do it correctly is that it's not always the same distance. And, so it's hard to compare between countries. Maybe the climate is important. There are so many things that could be important that it's hard to compare like this, I think. It would be nice to bring all the kids to California and perform it. That would be a large budget.
You could do a control where they run independently.
In any case, they run independently. So in any case, they run alone first, and then they run in pairs. Right, so you can correct for it.
You subtract the difference somehow.
Yeah, so what we look at is the difference between the first time that they run and the second time that they run, right? That's the number that we use. But it could be that the difference when you run 40 meters and 60 meters is less, it's not clear how to compare the two.
Well, it could be proportional time.
It could be.
Seems like there could be some.
Right. You can get some conclusion. I agree with you. You can get some conclusion. It could be that, for example, boys get tired faster or girls get tired faster within distance. So I don't know if it's linear and I can just look at proportion, but you can definitely get some kind of sense out of what we have. Hopefully we'll be able to do more controlled way between this. Okay, so we have these kids. They perform the same task of throwing balls into a bucket, and everything is the same. 7 to 9-year-old, we have over here the proportion who chose to compete. The first one is the patriarchal, the second one is the matrilineal. that difference is not statistically significant. This difference is not statistically significant. Well, when there are 7-year-olds, there isn't a statistically significant difference between boys and girls in the choice to compete. However, when we look at older kids, the most interesting part is here. So let's start here. The less interesting one is that in the matrilineal society, girls and boys don't change during this period. In the patriarchal society, what we see is that the boys become more competitive and the girls become less competitive. Right? So it seems as if something happened during puberty that makes boys more competitive and girls less competitive. Right? That seems to be what drives the result that we have. Okay, so that's an interesting, I think, piece of evidence about the gender difference when it happens. Okay? We also took some blood, or at least tried to take blood and saliva to look at the testosterone level. I still do not have the result of this. Is it just nurture? Well, it's not, but how can we show it? So together with Moshe, and Moshe, I hope, will be useful in answering some of the questions, and that's not because I'm trying to be polite or something. He really took the lead on this one, and he knows much more about it. But I will try to do my best. So we're going to look at handiness. We're going to look at left-handed and right-handed. Basically, what we're trying to look for is a biological evidence for gender differences. Right? If we can find this, it would show at least, the strawman is wrong. A bit of a background. So apparently, the exposure to male hormones affect the lefties versus right-handed, right? So it affects the use of your hands. That's just one piece of evidence. We have lots of them. So apparently that's a consensus that exposure to sex hormone affects whether you are left-handed or right-handed.
Only among women?
Sorry?
Only among women or both?
Both, I think. Again, well, everything that I say, before that I felt safe in what I said over here. It's work in progress, and if I'm wrong, I apologize. I'll still try to sound confident, but leftists perform better at mental rotation. If you look at some interesting, there are gazillion of evidence like this. The favorite one is actually the one over here. If you look at presidents, left-handedness is really, you see much more of it. What was the one that you told me on the way? Earnings. So left-handed men earn about $20,000 to $30,000 more a year, or what was the number?
About 10 to 13% more.
10 to 13% more. Okay, so I remember something with numbers, right? Left-handed men and women earn more money. Apparently there are differences. If you look, differences that seems like, not by chance. It's hard to imagine that just because I'm left-handed, with the gender you can come up with discrimination stories or whatever. Left-handed, it's kind of more difficult to do this. And left-handed, it's interesting. My son is left-handed, so I need to learn more about it. Study 1. Villages in India, lots of subjects. You need lots of subjects because there are not that many left-handed, somewhere between 10 to 20%, depending on the sample. We measure it, with the hand that they use, with the leg, the foot that they kick. There are a few standard ways to measure it. Apparently in some societies, even in societies in which people are trained not to be left-handed but right-handed, they still kick with the left leg, right? Because no one taught them that that's bad. So it seems to be, we seem to have the right measure according to this literature, and we use the same ball task as before, right? So that's the same task. Just summary statistics, you could see that in our sample about 7% were left-handed. And the first result, men are more competitive than women. We had it before. That just shows that our sample is not strange. Men are more likely to choose to compete than women. Okay? Another piece of evidence is that males are more likely to be left-handed. And that's not unique to this environment. Right? So men are about twice as likely to be, in our sample over here, men are about twice as likely to be lefties than women. Okay? And here comes the main piece of evidence of this part, which is, if you look at the right-hand people, you see the regular gender differences. You look at the lefties, you see the same gender difference. What's really striking, I think, is that left-handed women are significantly more competitive than right-handed men. Right? So there seems to be something really important with the handiness that is going on over here. Right? And it's even bigger than the gender gap that we have. Yes?
Which test was this?
The same throwing balls throwing that we had before. Okay, so that seems to be the hand that you use seems to be really important in the level of competitiveness that you show. Okay, and that, if we look at the data, we see that if we control for handiness, it reduces about 10% of the gender difference that we found. Right, but you know, still the most striking result, I think, from this is that left-handed women are more competitive than right-handed men.
Were there differences in the success rates by handedness?
You remember?
The lefties were slightly worse.
Lefties were slightly worse, even. Right? So it's not success rate. Maybe I have the figure also, but lefties are not more successful. Okay? Other questions about this? They are 20% more likely to choose to compete. It's highly significant, and the effect size is about the same as the sex gap. Okay, they are not more successful. If you look at what we have, they are slightly less. You remember if it's significant, the difference? It's not significant, the difference. Okay. Maybe they believe they are better, right? So you raised the question about beliefs, right? So beliefs are really important, especially when you choose whether to compete or not. Your beliefs are really important because, you know, if I believe that I'm better, I'm more likely to choose to compete. It doesn't seem so. When we ask them, we try to get into their beliefs. We didn't find any evidence for this. The second study that we had, it's Mechanical Turk. I don't know if you used it. It's kind of fun to use. Online subject pool from Amazon. They had a short survey in which we tried to figure out whether they are right-handed or left-handed. And we got some other measures. The most interesting one that we're going to talk about is the risk measure. And the risk measure goes like this. You get $250 in this case, and you have to decide how much of it you want to keep to yourself and how much of it you want to invest in a risky option. The amount that you invest in the risky option can either, what was the, you remember what was the multiplier over here? 2.5, right. The amount that you chose to invest was, if you were lucky, 2.5, no, how likely was it?
We're flipping a coin.
Flipping a coin.
So it depends.
Again, you get $250, right? You choose how much of it X to invest. With probability 50%, this X is going to be 2.5 times more. So the expected value is, I don't know, 1.15, I think, or something like that. And with 50% chance, you're going to lose what you invested. And so at the end, you'll have 250 minus X, minus the amount that you invested, plus, if you lost nothing, if you gained 2.5X. Okay? It's okay? So basically, it's a measure of risk aversion. If you are risk neutral, you'll choose to invest all 250. If you are extremely, extremely loss averse, you can choose to invest 0. And how much risk are you willing to take depend, you know, X is a measure of how much risk you're willing to take. So that was the task that they got. And that's what we got. Again, that's the just summary of the people that we had. And what we see over here is that, again, there are more lefties among male than among females. Men take more risk. So in general, men take 125, X equals 125, women is 98. Within each sex, Lefties take more risk, 124 versus 188. With the women, it's a bit larger difference. Same was true for the competitiveness, if you remember. And, well, that's the result. That's the main result before I go to the model, the simple model. That should not be, I don't know how it will interact with left-handed versus right-handed over here, because I don't know, but you remember if you ran a regression on income?
I controlled income and found significant effects on income.
Plus, the people, my guess is that the people that go on Mechanical Turk are not rich to begin with, right? So you're paid, I don't remember, how much are you paid? 20 cents?
20 cents.
20 cents to do some job. So it's, it's not, those are not rich people to begin with.
Seems really risky.
Yes, we see it all the time. So that's a measure that we used many, many times. And to choose anything less than 250 in this case, you have to be extremely risk averse, right? I want this, I want to invest in this. And you see people all over the place, right? So it's, you can justify this. So if you have subjects in the lab, you're undergraduate and you give them $100 and you ask them to, for them, if they get $50, they can have a nice, weekend. I don't know what they can do with $50, but so you can think about such extreme risk aversion, but usually it doesn't really make sense. That's what we observe.
The average age of your subjects, what is the variance?
Over here, you remember in Mechanical Turk?
I don't know the average, but it's huge variance. But we also control for that.
It's but Mechanical Turk is nice. So in some sense, it's nicer than the students that we have because it's very diverse in terms of age, where they are, education, and they seem to take it seriously. So every time you run this, it's online. You run some questions to see whether they pay attention. It turns out that they do. So it's kind of an interesting sample.
So doesn't this mean that some of your competitiveness results can just be explained as a sex difference in risk preference?
Absolutely. So I think that's one of the big questions. I don't know how to disentangle the two conceptually, not in terms of experiments, but conceptually I don't know how to disentangle competitiveness from risk attitudes. Inherently, when something is more competitive, when the payoff is more competitive, it also has higher variance. So risk should push you in the same direction. And I'm not sure that it's apart from us that we want to know the source of it. If you think about the real world, I'm not sure that it's that important to know exactly which one. I wish I knew, but they seem to be working in the same direction every time. So again, I don't know how to disentangle two. So we have in the maze study, for example, at the beginning, we did have one that was just risk. So it wasn't, you won 1 out of the 6 won, and that person was paid the same as, that did not have an effect on, we didn't find the gender effect over there. So it seems as if there is something on top of risk attitudes, but it's very hard to do.
This we could make people, compare people competing against people and people competing against computer.
Right, so that's what we did in the other one. So in the mazes, what we did, if you remember, I said there were 6 people, and they were either the winner take all, or one person is going to be chosen at random out of the 6. And that, when it was at random, we did not see gender differences. When it was competitive, we did find gender differences. So that shows maybe that there is something on top of the risk attitudes, but I'm sure that the risk attitude also worked. We have a survey with this game. We have a survey of all the people that used it, and we could get the gender differences. It's about 20 papers by now, and all of them found that men are more risk-taking in this game than women. So it seems to be like a robust finding too.
There are 2 ways you might get at the difference between competitiveness and risk aversion. One is vary the stake. So unless it's loss aversion rather than risk aversion, nobody should be risk averse for $5.
Shouldn't if they are expected utility maximizer, but if they are target earnings, for example, if I know that now $5 would mean that I can have nice lunch today, or
so that's the other thought. If you deferred the payoff by a week,
right.
then you'd be measuring pure risk aversion rather than
Well, it interacts with time preference also. So there are people that try to look at this, and that becomes messy because time preferences also interact with
that
this.
could be constant, right? Everybody gets put off by a week, right? And now we're measuring risk aversion and not the fact that I need the $5 right now for lunch.
Right. I'll have to think about it because it does, the time preference also complicates stuff. So I'm not sure that it's really as clean as we want it to be, right? But so it could have some kind of gender interaction with gender also, the fact that it's 1 week from there. But that's definitely one way to look at it. To try and... You had a comment or no? Okay. Yes.
Can you say whether or not there are more left-handed women in the matrilineal society versus the precipitous side?
I asked Moshe on the way here if he looked at it, and he said that it's not interesting. And thank you for asking the question. Maybe now he will be convinced that it is interesting. We had I think it's interesting. So that's also what we try to look with the hormonal changes. So we had actually, that's because of Dan, we went all over the world to look for some piece of evidence, and that's actually an interesting story. So Moshe spoke with Dan, and Dan told him, look at the foot to height ratio, right? That's interesting. You look in every Western society, right? Not just Western. Foot to height ratio is higher for men than for women. We go to India, we measure the feet and many other things over there. It turns out we have 5 measures of, 2D40, other measures. None of them come significantly interesting. Foot to height ratio, very interestingly, we find that it's the same, right? Men to women. Maybe the nicest result I've ever found, because it shows that the culture, or at least under some circumstances, it can show that the culture influences the biology, the size of the foot for people. Don't tell me that it's not true, because I'm going to tell you that the data is not true, so the interpretation is not important. Sorry.
I mean, couldn't you just as easily say the other way, that if the biology is different, then that influences culture?
Let's get back to this in a second. We'll get back to this with the model that I'll present in a minute. But the idea was, look, of course you can say something like this, but I don't want to push this argument. But if culture affects the size of your foot, that's quite nice, I think. It correlates with the size of your foot. Or how tall you grow, right? So you can come up with nutrition. But anyway, so we got this result. It was only 1 out of 5, so we wanted to check it out of sample. I went to Mexico to measure stinky feet in matrilineal society over there. We didn't find the effect. Moshe went back to India to measure the feet again. We couldn't replicate the result. So you send us to the ends of the world, nothing came out of it.
I think people should travel. It's good.
Right. I didn't say that Mexico was a very nice resort, and Huatulco. I enjoyed it a lot. So great fish.
The left-handed ratio was pretty low.
Yes.
About 7%.
Yes.
Suggesting that some of your right-handers were repressed left-handers.
Could be. Yes. I don't know about them doing this in India, so I don't know about the matrilineal society having strong norms against left-handed, but it could be. I would find it more costly over there. So for you, if you're left-handed and to be trained as right-handed, the cost is not that high, because basically we're clerks, right? We don't do much work. If you work in the rice field, I would guess that it's quite costly, right? Because if I have to use my bad hand, it would be more costly, but I don't know about, and we don't know, right?
So I should mention that we collected the footedness measure as well, where there's certainly less pressure to kick with the left foot, and we find the exact same effects for footedness as for handed. So that's unlike the rest.
Okay. So about the biological measure, that what you said, that maybe people, for some weird reason, people are different. To begin with, the biology is different, and then culture evolves out of it, right? You could think about such an evolutionary story with the matrilineal society. So I didn't mention it because I don't think that it makes sense, but it could happen. So this matrilineal society evolved around, or started around 1,000 years ago. Men went out for wars. They were out for many years. Sometimes they didn't come back. So that's how it started. That's a historical accident. That's not biology yet. But then in the pre-antibiotics, about 60% of the kids in these villages didn't make it. So you can come up with story that the more competitive women maybe somehow were better at protecting the kids. And because of that, they were more successful in the evolutionary sense. that would have to explain why this tendency to be more competitive goes from the mother to the daughter, but not to the son. So it's a very bizarre explanation in my view, but you can cook up something like this that is hard to reject, I think. Yes?
So I'm curious, has anyone ever done any studies like this looking at whether feeling you're unique or being unique or different leads to more competitive or more risky? And so, for example, if you were to do this study with a group of redheads, would they be more risk-prone than the brunettes? Sort of that having a history of being unique or different, and somehow that
right.
Because that could perhaps start to tell you if this is some sort of nature.
It's a good question. I don't know. So basically, with left-handed, we did have some a priori expectation because it is influenced by some sex hormones, prenatal sex hormones. So it seems to be, we did have prior. I don't have it about red-headed, right? But, in general, if you can put all of it into the regression and find, maybe that's what we're picking up is, I'm unique for some reason, and because of that, I'm more competitive. That would be very interesting. I don't think that anyone looked at something like this. Yes?
So two things, because I've actually read some studies on internet, so I read into this, and I can talk to you later about it. One is that women are threatened by math. So when you give them a task like this to compete, what's the probability of success? So, and I notice most of these measure risk in dollars and cents, and women in this country are not as good as calculating things, and there's an anxiety related to it. And so men might feel more comfortable with that task and know how to take risks. So have you tried these risk aversion measures in something besides financial calculations?
So first, some of the people that we have over here are traders in the Chicago Board of Trade. Some of them are MBA students, not in this experiment, but that play this game, and we still find it, even with the MBA students, on which, it's kind of hard to explain, to come up with this explanation. There are other measures, but they are all money related in some sense. It could be that the gender difference is going to be different with money related issues and with, I don't know, safety belts or whatever other ways, playing in the playground or whatever. My impression from reading the psych literature on this, on other tasks about from financial reason, is that all over the place you find that males are more risk takers than females. I think that it's quite universal. That's my impression from reading the psych literature on this.
And the other thing with the societal capabilities, I think that men in general have better societal capabilities than women. That's one of the proven sex
Right,
differences.
right.
And then if you're left-handed, that means you're right brain thinking, and that has to do with the societal capabilities. So couldn't it be a factor of confidence?
It could be confidence. So we try to control for it, first of all, by looking at success rate. There is no difference. If anything, we saw that they are a bit less good. And beliefs, right? We ask them, and it seems as if there is no difference in beliefs. But it could be that you're more confident with that. Right. We do have one control over here in which we do try to look. So we gave them games. We asked them to solve puzzles also, the subjects. And that doesn't seem, so puzzle goes exactly to this kind of abilities. That doesn't seem to have an effect when you put it in the regression. But
What, that you didn't give a sex difference? I thought one of your papers you got a sex difference.
in the puzzles we get sex difference. So, but does it interact with handiness? You remember? Okay, see, he's perfect, right? He remembers everything. He's young. So women are less good at the mazes, but he doesn't interact with the handiness. Right? So comments about this. So I want to present a toy model that will try to look at the interaction between nature and nurture, basically, right? So think about you're born. Each one of us is born with some tendency to compete C, which is whatever distributed in whatever way you want. Between 0, those are people that never compete, and 1, those are people that no matter what they'll compete, right? So it's And as I said, it could have any shape that you want. So nurture can affect the minimum level C, the CM, that is used in order to decide whether to compete or not. So I will come from a culture in which, or I will be brought up such that CM is affected by the culture. If my tendency to compete is smaller than this, I just choose not to compete. If it's higher than this cutoff, I will choose to compete. And this is interesting because if you have the same tendency to compete, the same C, your CM could be different in different cultures, and in particular, whether you are a man or a woman in a different culture. So in the Masai, in order to decide to compete, you have to, as a woman, you have to have a really high C, in this case. And if you're a man, you'll have to have a really low C, right? So the CM could also have an index of gender in different cultures, right? So that's the kind of way I like to think about it. So basically, the culture influences the level of your decision to choose whether to do this. If you are extremely competitive, you'll compete in any culture, in any gender. But most of us are not that extreme, so I'm kind of competitive. If I'll be in an environment in which competing is good, I'll compete. If not, I will not compete, right? That's the CM that could change between cultures. And I think that's a similar explanation that you can think about sexual orientations, for example. So say that I haven't decided whether someone could be gay and not interested in the other sex at all. The other one could be straight and not think about same sex at all. Some people could be somewhere in between, and depending on the culture, they can decide whether to live with the same sex or different sex.
Also, when you make the decision, it may depend very, very heavily on whether it's a private decision and you believe that no one else will know your decision,
right?
Or it's a public decision, like in case of engagement. I'm not sure. So do you think that the social norms apply only if other people observe you? You do not internalize them yourself? No? I think other people here know much more than I do about
So my guess is that many of the social norms that I bring with me will affect me even if I'll go to a different group of people, right? So to a great extent, that will do. So if the social norm, if I'm Israeli, in Israel, maybe negotiating is more likely. So I'll be more likely to go out and negotiate in places that, I don't know, if you're coming from San Diego, you're less likely to do this. So I'm not sure that it's just if you're observed, right?
Just, but the combination.
Right, the combination, clearly social norm, we know that being observed could increase them, but it could be something that you internalize also. That's right, that's the idea that we have here. So that's just a very, a toy model to think about it, how this could interact with it. Thank you.